Genshin's 4.5 update finally introduced a new banner called Chronicled Wish. From the list, there are 6 5-stars you can choose, 3 standard and 3 limited. How's it going, everyone? This is Kay, and I'll break down which of the limited characters you should prioritize choosing. So before we start, the general rule for most gacha games is to pull for limited units over standard ones, obviously because limited are temporary until they return, while standards will always be available. But just because you can potentially pull a standard 5-star character from the regular banner or when losing the 50-50, it doesn't guarantee you the specific unit you want. So if you want Diluc, Jean, or Mona specifically, this is the perfect opportunity to get them. For this video, however, the focus will be on the limited characters. Albedo is a quick swap Geo sub DPS character who can add more damage towards your rotations. What makes him a great asset is his flexibility in being splashable into many teams. His Geo application won't really interfere with your elemental reactions, and his on-field time is very short, which is helpful for your other characters. Less time means faster rotation cycles, or your DPS will retain buffs a few seconds longer. His primary talent will be his E skill. Albedo will place a Geo flower that covers a large area and will trigger a Geo attack that scales with his defense whenever enemies are hit within the circle. His flower is considered a Geo construct, so characters like Zhongli or Chiori will benefit. The talent has a 100% uptime as it only has a 4-second cooldown with a 30-second duration, but a huge problem is that the Geo flower can be destroyed by certain types of bosses or enemies. This is Albedo's biggest weakness as it forces you to switch back into him in order to drop the skill again, which can affect the flow of your rotations. What's worse is when enemies leave the flower's AoE, again forcing you to reapply his skill. Now, building Albedo is fairly easy. He works well with the 3-star Harbinger sword. His Spindle sword was an event weapon, so it's free to play for many players. Unfortunately, players who miss out on the event from way back then miss out on Albedo's best sword. In terms of artifacts, if you have the Husk set, it'll be perfect for him, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to farm for it, as the Husk and Clamp sets are niche artifacts and won't really be an efficient way to spend your time in resin. Instead, farm for the Golden Trope set, which can be just as good. His burst is mainly used just for damage, but Albedo's A4 passive can buff the team's EM by 125, which makes him a nice utility character, especially when you throw him into Dendro reaction teams. An important thing to remember is that his E skill can snapshot, but keep in mind his skill scales off of defense, so many buffers that increases attack aren't ideal for him. As we know, Geo is a defensive element, so Geo won't trigger damaging reactions, but again, he is splashable into many teams. Albedo still has value, especially as a Geo unit. With Chiori's release, that may or may not affect his role, but both will have pros and cons to them. Chiori will excel in damage, especially in single targets. She's also far more consistent since her dolls can't be destroyed, unlike Albedo's flower. But he does have a better AoE and offers utility in the form of his EM buff. Not to mention, he's far more flexible in team builds. Albedo still has value, but it's safe to say he isn't regarded as an S-tier unit. All Eula fans rejoice, our queen has returned. She's regarded as the strongest physical DPS character in Genshin Impact. Her burst explosion can reach well over 200k with ease, a lot more depending on substats and supports. Eula is also very easy to use and is quite self-sufficient. All you really need is an Electro character to help trigger Superconduct, and preferably another Cryo for energy. On top of her burst, Eula's normal attacks are quite strong, meaning she's someone who can deal decent damage consistently, while her skill has short cooldowns when tapped, giving you quick and consistent Cryo applications. Basically, you should invest into all her talents. Which leads into some issues. She is a high investment character who absolutely needs her burst and normal attacks to be in high levels. Ideally, level 8 or 9, crowning them is even better. Eula's burst also has consistency issues as the explosion hits only once, meaning if the crit misses or worst case scenario, the boss enters an immune state or teleports far from her, that can result in the explosion missing. So because her crits can miss on her burst or miss entirely, Eula's normal attacks will be the consistent way she'll deal damage, so that's why you shouldn't neglect that talent. But her burst is the primary skill and can end fights quickly, meaning you should strive to access her burst every rotation if possible. Now, there is a delay between activating her burst and the explosion itself, so you can't control the timing of the attack, and it will depend on you reading the attack patterns of enemies. In a way, her burst will rely on multiple factors. If you can initiate the best possible combo for maximum damage, a little luck depending on what enemy or bosses will do, and who the enemy is, because if you're facing Ruin Guards or enemies with physical resistance, then she's not the best character to use. As a physical-focused DPS, Eula's team, as mentioned before, will typically consist of an Electro and another Cryo to help her with energy, therefore restricting some team flexibility. Above all else, Eula and her team is not reaction focused, which can be limiting for some battles. There are some players, however, who uses Eula in Hyper Bloom teams, which can be very effective because she won't really interfere with Hyper Bloom reactions while you're able to add high physical damage on top. Her burst will increase in damage based on how many stacks she accumulates when attacking enemies after activation. There are several burst combos you can use, but the most standard one is E skill, which leads into burst, then normal attack 4 times, holder skill, then normal attack till her burst explodes. Of course, there are other variations that offer different effects, but the combo I mentioned should be the one you learn first. Mika is a support for Eula you can use. I have him at C0, so personally, I don't really use him often, and a lot of players would agree that if you don't have him at higher constellation levels, preferably C6, there are better options for supports. You can use him for his attack speed boost, but again, existing Eula teams are more than enough unless you have an open slot for him. Klee was the second 5-star limited character that was released in the game. You remember, right? During version 1.0 when we all still had fun with this game. I'm just joking. Well, half joking, but being such an old character, Klee is sometimes regarded as outdated. Now, this doesn't mean she's no longer effective. As a Pyro Catalyst user, Klee has constant access to Pyro damage just from using normal attacks. This is very helpful compared to, let's say, Yoimiya or Hu Tao, who relies on their E skill to infuse Pyro. Because of this, Klee can work well within Burgeon teams. If you like fire and want to burn down the world, one of her best teams is a Mono Pyro team. There are two things that makes her quite special. First is her ability to potentially stun lock and juggle enemies with her charge attack, which is her primary way to deal damage. Second is her phenomenal battery generation for the team, hence why she's so great in Mono Pyro. Her elemental skill can generate 4 pyro particles for each charge, and with her A4, every time her charge attack crits, all party members will gain 2 energy. As mentioned before, Klee's charge will be her primary form of attack. She's also fairly easy to build and has free-to-play weapon options, one of her best being the Wit Sith. Now, Klee can feel a bit clunky or awkward to play sometimes. This is because she requires animation cancelling either through jump or dash cancel. Dashing with Klee, however, is usually not preferred since you will consume a lot of stamina really fast. Cause don't forget, her charge attack will also use up a lot of stamina. Her A1 passive, however, will help a bit as it gives a 50% chance of gaining an explosive spark when using her skill or normal attacks to deal damage. The spark is used on her next charge attack, which increases damage and consumes 0 stamina. Even with the passive, stamina management is still necessary. There are 2 combos you can use. One normal that leads into charge, then jump cancel. This will offer the highest damage and is the quickest way to break enemies' balance, but stamina will be consumed faster. The second combo is 2 normals, then charge attack. This will use less stamina and has higher A1 usage since you're normal attacking a lot more. Klee's Jumpty Dumpty has 2 charges and can deal multiple pyro damages that adds up to deal a decent amount of overall damage if it all hits. Now, it has a very long cooldown per charge being 20 seconds each. Also, using a second Dumpty will cause the mines from the first one to immediately explode. You can, however, use the first Dumpty for energy and save the second one during her combos. Her burst is a continuous attack for a duration as long as Klee's on the field. You can actually cancel her initial Jumpty Dumpty animation by performing her burst right after the throw. More about her stun lock and juggling. This is a great way to prevent enemies from moving or attacking you. Obviously, bigger enemies or bosses that can't be juggled in the air can still hit you. Klee's juggling is so great, she can actually knock heavier enemies into Venti's vortex, which is great for both characters. On top of being a bit uncomfortable to play, Klee is sadly outmatched by other characters like Hu Tao and Yoimiya if you are going for that pyro DPS. Vape teams are also not considered vital for Klee. It can work, but compared to the other two, she's not as good as Hu Tao and Yoimiya for Vape teams. So out of the 3 limited characters, who should you pull for within the Chronicled banner? First priority is Albedo. He's very effective as a sub DPS. You just drop his skill, throw his burst, then swap him out. He'll add a lot of damage towards your rotations with little effort. He's also in a very good spot as an off-field Geo damage dealer since his skill produces a construct which synergizes well with other Geo units. His EM buff and team flexibility puts him in a better position compared to the other 2. The main drawback is that his flower can be destroyed. If Albedo isn't a unit that interests you, Eula is the strongest physical damage dealer we'll have. The problem with physical is that it's not the best form of damage and several enemies have resistance against it. Regardless, her damage output is phenomenal and it takes very little to reach high numbers. Despite many DPSs outshining her, she's still very unique within her field and is a reminder of the good old days where physical was dominant when Genshin first released. For Klee, she just has so many pyro competitions. Hu Tao, Xiangling, Linny, and even Diluc now since he's a lot better thanks to his plunge attack role with Xian Yun. Not saying Klee is bad, but a major reason why players may want to get her is because you like the character. So comment down below to let me know if you're pulling on the Chronicled banner. If so, which out of the 6 characters are you choosing, or are you choosing a weapon instead? Don't forget to check out my 4.5 banner breakdown with Chiori, Ito, Nuvalet, and Kazuha. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for future Genshin and Star Rail videos. Good luck on your pulls everyone, till next time.